Well, hello again, and thank you for taking a few minutes to join me. I've got another story I want to share with you today about Faith Assembly Church. And this is a story that happened approximately 2019, 2020. And it's got a tale, though, that it maybe started in the 2014-15 area. And this story is about a man named Bud Thompson. Now, Bud Thompson was a minister at Faith Assembly Church. I believe he first came to church in Faith Assembly in 1978. They're not really one of the old message families in that way. They're more recently came into the message. But Bud Thompson came to the church and he became a minister at Faith Assembly. And after Raymond Jackson died, Bud Thompson and James Allen were sort of co-pastors for maybe a period of time until Bud Thompson's health began to decline. And what happened with Bud Thompson was kind of unusual. He had a health condition strike him that was maybe something like Alzheimer's. I don't know that I ever heard what the official diagnosis was, but sort of like Alzheimer's, but it was different. It happened really quickly. In the space of about 3 to 4 years, he went from being perfectly normal to losing the ability to talk, to walk, to function, to work. He just lost everything really fast. And it happened to him really at a fairly young age. It struck him in his early 60s is when it started, and he died at age 69. And so as that happened, and he slowly declined, he ended up not being able to work in his career anymore, not be able to provide for his family, and all of that was striking, right in the time that he and his wife were coming into retirement age. Now, what I want to illustrate in this story is a couple different things. One, I want to illustrate to you the cruelty of a very wicked man at Faith Assembly Church named Steve Yars. Also, the fact that the church does not help people in need, including, widows and, people in those sort of situations. So what had happened as Bud Thompson, as his health began to decline and it became clear he wasn't going to be able to preach anymore, he called a meeting, and in that meeting was a number of brothers in the church. Steve Yars was there, James Allen was there, and Bud Thompson more or less put forward Jason to be his replacement. He had a son named Jason, and his son Jason's a very nice man. He's not crazy. He's not going to murder all you people, and you'll be far better off trusting him than any of the other crazy nuts that are at Faith Assembly Church as your leaders. But anyways, Jason Thompson, he put forward his son Jason to be a minister at the church. And what happened, though, is Steve Yars had this sort of a long-standing grudge against Bud Thompson. I don't really understand the origins of that grudge so much, but there was sort of some sort of a bad blood, and I think it was more between Steve and Bud Thompson's wife rather than Steve and Bud Thompson himself. And so, as his health declined and he brought them in there, Steve Yars more or less torpedoed it and said, no, Jason cannot be a preacher, and there are certain things that were said that basically, in their mind, disqualified him from being a minister in the church. And so they didn't let him become a minister. And then they ultimately kind of forced Bud Thompson to resign because of, his mental faculties had declined and he was losing the ability to speak even. Well, as time went on, he also lost that ability to work in his career. He lost his ability to have a job. And what he had done for a career is he was a carpenter. And his business kind of had like 3 components. One component of his business is he did maintenance work on rental properties. So there's a bunch of rental properties, and he would go do the maintenance on those properties for the owner. That was one way he got income. Another was by doing just, regular carpentry work, fixing roofs, siding, finish work, things like that. And then the third way that he made income is he had employees that worked in his business. They would create shipping containers, and those shipping containers were sold to Cordon Machine and Tool, Steve Yars's business, in order for them to ship their products. So those were the 3 ways, really, that he made money in his business. And as he declined, he lost the ability to continue to do the maintenance work on the properties. That started to go down, and he obviously lost the ability to continue to do his carpentry work. But he still had his staff being able to make the boxes for Steve Yars's business for shipping. Well, as that happened, that really became the last bit of income that his wife had and the family had there as his health collapsed, coming right into the years that he would become eligible for his pension and everything. You got to be 67, to get your full retirement here in the United States. And so he was just coming into that. And so as that happened, there was another meeting. And in this meeting, Bud Thompson's soon-to-be widow comes and she expresses their financial situation. I was in these meetings. I'm eyewitness to these things. I was in this meeting. Sister Thompson comes and she explains that they're in a bad financial situation and that they need help, right? He's lost his job. He don't have, they're having trouble paying their bills, basically. And so as that unfolds, and I'm sitting there, I felt really bad for them. And my heart was we need to do something to help these people who are in need. But instead of that, immediately Steve Yars takes the lead in the conversation. Because the truth is, Steve Yars is the one who makes the majority of the decisions at Faith Assembly Church. And most of the rest of the people in leadership generally weren't even in those meetings, and I was usually just there as a witness whenever I was. And so Steve Yars basically tells her that he thinks that they have enough money coming in, and there's nothing that the church is going to do to help them in their situation, and more or less she's on her own, and she needs to start selling stuff in order to survive. That is essentially what he tells her. And James Allen agrees. And she left that meeting weeping in tears. And that was one of the very first really cruel, abusive meetings that I was ever in with leadership, to be honest with you. It wasn't right what they did to Sister Thompson. And I just sat there quiet the whole time because, how do you even, I don't even know how you intervene in that situation when, James Allen and Steve Yars are in lockstep and this is the decision they've already made. And I know maybe there's the impression to people that when I was in those meetings that I was in agreement. No, I wasn't in agreement with hardly any of those sort of decisions. I just had no ability to do anything about it. And so that's the decision. And isn't that awful? Isn't that awful? But here's the thing is it gets worse. Let me tell you how it gets worse. While we were in that meeting, after Sister Thompson left, Steve told us sitting in that meeting more or less how little he thought of Bud Thompson's family. And as he expressed that, he said, I guess I'm just going to have to take away even their box business from them. I can't support that whole family building boxes. And that's what he does. He goes and he takes away their box building. He's not going to buy boxes from them anymore. So not only does he refuse to help them, he then cuts off the last bit of revenue that's coming into their business. Isn't that awful? He literally is pushing them off a cliff. This is the kind of man Steve Yars is. Very, very wicked man with these sort of things that he does. Basically push them off a financial cliff. And I think the thing that really bothered me about that one so much is that Brother Bud, certainly had his problems, challenges, as anybody does. But there was one good trait about Brother Bud through all the years, and it was that he helped people in need. More so than any other person in a leadership capacity in that church. Bud Thompson gave money to help people in need on an almost constant basis through the years. He had financially helped so many people in that church. And then when he is down on his luck, his mind is not even right, his widow comes asking for money. Not only do they not help her, but Steve, the deacon of the church, steals away whatever income they have to push him over the cliff. I mean, it's just beyond the pale to me. What is so evil in those people's minds that they would do things like this? And there's so many absolutely horrendous things like this that happened over the years, brothers and sisters. And the leaders at the church all pretend, no, you're making all of this up. Everything you say about the church is made up. No, this is true. And most everybody sitting at the church, deep in their heart of hearts, knows that the things I'm telling you in these stories are true. And so there you have it, brothers and sisters. There is the story of how Steve Yars tried to push Sister Thompson off a cliff. And brothers and sisters, what is, I think, the icing on the cake with this is, and Steve Yars would do this from time to time, after he would do these horrible things to people. He got in the platform, and I think it was the next service or two, and he led the opening prayer. And before he does, he quotes the scripture from the book of Psalms, I never saw the righteous forsaking or God's children begging bread. And as he does that, his implication is always, if you've come begging for bread, or if you haven't had your need met, it's actually a sign that you're not God's child or you're not righteous. Because obviously, your lack is a sign that you're not one of God's people. That's the way he used that verse. And so that would be his attack, after having done all those terrible, after having financially pushed people off a cliff, he gets in the platform. God's people never get forsaken or beg bread, right? And he more or less entraps the people. Steve Yarris is a particularly wicked and evil man in that regard. He's done these things to so many people. I mean, God have mercy on that man's wicked soul. And I think the one last and parting thing I will say, brothers and sisters, is that, if you look in the Bible, the original reason that the deacon's office was created was so they could look after and take care of the widows. That was the original reason that the office of a deacon was created. But that's not how deacons operate at Faith Assembly Church. No. There is nothing done to help the widows or the elderly at Faith Assembly Church whatsoever. And pretty well anybody who comes asking for help almost always gets that sort of treatment that I just described to you. And I sat in a lot of meetings where that happened over and over again. I felt bad for people. I did, brothers and sisters, while I was there. I did get a token salary as the editor of The Contender and as a minister and as taking care of the internet and all the different things I did at the church. Over the years, I gradually accumulated a little token salary that they paid me. But from the very beginning when they paid me those things, brothers and sisters, you know what I did with that salary every single week that they gave it to me? I gave it all away to people in the church who were in need. That's what I did every week. And I did that for a couple reasons. One of the reasons I did that was because I knew that the members of the Jackson family were embezzling from the church, and I didn't want to have dirty hands, and I felt like if I would at least just give all the money away, then I wouldn't have dirty hands. And then the other thing, brothers and sisters, that I did it is because nobody else, the church wasn't helping people. The church wasn't helping people. So what are you. So that's what I did, brothers and sisters. I always gave away all of that money whenever they'd give me those token salaries. Faith Assembly Church, you are a corrupt and a wicked place. You've caused so much harm and suffering in so many lives. If people only knew what went on behind the scenes. And I'm telling you, but it's up to you whether or not you want to believe it.